The room was a battlefield, and I was losing. My voice cracked as I stared at Eli, his eyes cold as the New York winter outside our office window. I'd built an empire, but here I was, begging for the one thing money couldn't buy: his forgiveness. My name is Julian Carter, and I was the kind of man who made people flinch with a single glance. At 28, I'd clawed my way to the top of Manhattan's cutthroat tech scene, CEO of Carter Innovations, a company that turned dreams into apps and apps into millions. My office was a sleek fortress of glass and steel, a testament to my control. But control, I learned, was a fragile thing when it came to Eli Martinez, my assistant, my shadow, my everything I refused to name. Eli started working for me 2 years ago, fresh out of NYU with a degree in computer science and eyes that saw through my polished exterior. He was 26, lean, with a quiet intensity that unnerved me. His dark curls fell just above his brow, and his smile, rare but disarming, could light up a room. I hired him because he was brilliant, not because I noticed the way his hands moved when he typed or how his laugh made my chest ache. At least, that's what I told myself. I was a fool to think I could keep him at arm's length. Our days were a dance of late nights, coffee runs, and fleeting glances that lingered too long. He anticipated my needs before I voiced them, fixed my code when I was too stubborn to admit I was wrong, and stayed when everyone else left. But I was his boss, and I wielded that power like a weapon. I demanded perfection, snapped at mistakes, and once, God help me, made him bow to me in jest during a late-night meeting. The team laughed. Eli didn't. His eyes burned with something I couldn't name then, but now I know it was shame. It was a Thursday when everything unraveled. We were pitching to investors, a deal that could have pushed Carter Innovations into the billions. I was on edge, my temper a live wire. Eli had prepared the presentation, flawless as always, but I found a typo, a single misplaced comma, in a slide. I tore into him in front of the team, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. "If you can't handle this, maybe you shouldn't be here," I said. His face went blank, and he nodded, but I saw the tremor in his hands as he gathered his notes. That night, he didn't show up for our usual late-night strategy session. I called him, texted, emailed, nothing. Panic clawed at me, not because of the deal, but because Eli was gone. I drove to his tiny Brooklyn apartment, rain soaking my suit as I banged on his door. When he finally opened it, his eyes were red, his voice raw. "I'm done, Julian," he said. "I'm not your punching bag." I stood there, drenched, realizing I'd broken something I didn't know I needed. Eli wasn't just my assistant. He was the man I loved, and I'd pushed him away with every cruel word. I begged him to stay, but he shut the door, leaving me in the rain with the weight of my mistakes. The next morning, I found his resignation letter on my desk. Clean, precise, final. I stared at it, my chest tight, knowing I'd lost more than an employee. I'd lost the only person who saw me, not the CEO, but the man beneath the title. I had to fix this, but I didn't know how. All I knew was that I'd do anything to make it right, even if it meant kneeling for his forgiveness. The weeks that followed were a blur of regret and desperation. I threw myself into work, hoping to drown the ache. But every empty chair at the conference table screamed Eli's absence. The team noticed my distraction. The investors sensed weakness, and the company teetered on the edge of chaos. I didn't care. All I could think about was him. I started small, leaving voicemails he never returned, sending emails he probably deleted. I even showed up at his favorite coffee shop in Williamsburg, hoping to catch a glimpse of him. Once, I saw him through the window, laughing with a friend, and it gutted me. He looked lighter, freer, like the weight of my expectations had lifted. I didn't approach him. I didn't deserve to. But I couldn't let go. I started digging into his life. Not out of obsession, but out of a need to understand the man I'd hurt. I learned he was volunteering at a local LGBTQ+ youth center, teaching coding to kids who reminded him of himself, kids who grew up hiding who they were. Eli was gay, something he'd never hidden but never flaunted. And I realized how little I'd known about him. I'd been too busy building walls to see the man who stood beside me every day. One night, I found myself at the youth center. Not to confront him, but to see the world he cared about. The kids adored him, their faces lighting up as he explained code like it was poetry. I watched from the back, hidden in the shadows, my heart breaking at the sight of his kindness. He was everything I was: patient, selfless, real. I left before he saw me, but not before I made a decision. I wasn't just going to apologize. I was going to change. I started by fixing myself. I enrolled in therapy, something I'd scoffed at before. My therapist, a no-nonsense woman named Dr. Lee, forced me to confront my need for control, my fear of vulnerability. "You hurt him because you're scared," she said. "Scared of what he means to you." She was right. I'd spent years hiding my own feelings, burying my attraction to men under ambition and arrogance. Admitting I loved Eli meant admitting I was human, and that terrified me. I also reached out to the youth center, anonymously donating funds to support their programs. It wasn't a grand gesture to win Eli back. It was a step toward being someone he could respect. But the real test came when I heard he'd taken a job at a rival startup. The thought of him working for someone else, thriving without me, was a knife to the gut. Yet, it also gave me hope. If he was moving forward, maybe he'd give me a chance to do the same. I wrote him a letter, not an email, but a real letter, handwritten on paper that trembled in my hands. I poured everything into it: my regret, my shame, my love. I didn't expect a response, but I sent it anyway, hoping he'd see the man I was trying to become. Days passed, then weeks, and still nothing. I was ready to give up when my phone buzzed with a text: "Meet me at the pier. 8 p.m. Eli." The Brooklyn pier was alive with the hum of the city street musicians, couples laughing, the distant churn of the East River. I arrived early, my palms sweaty despite the October chill. Eli was already there, leaning against the railing, his silhouette framed by the Manhattan skyline. He didn't turn when I approached, but I could feel the weight of his presence. "You came," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, his eyes fixed on the water. "I read your letter," he said finally, his tone flat. "It doesn't change what you did." I swallowed hard, the words I'd rehearsed dissolving. "I know," I said. "I was an asshole, Eli. Worse than that. I hurt you, and I'll never forgive myself for it." He turned then, his dark eyes searching mine, and for a moment, I saw the Eli I knew: vulnerable, real, but guarded now, a wall I'd built between us. We walked along the pier, the silence heavy but not empty. I told him about therapy, about the youth center, about the man I was trying to be. He listened, his expression unreadable, but he didn't walk away. That was something. "Why now?" he asked, stopping under a street lamp. "Why do you care now?" "Because I love you," I wanted to say, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I said, "Because you made me see myself. The good, the bad, all of it. I don't want to be the man who hurts you." His jaw tightened, and he looked away, but I saw the flicker of something: hope. Maybe. Or pain. Eli told me about his new job, how it gave him purpose, how he was finally free to be himself. "I spent so long trying to prove myself to you," he said. "I thought if I was perfect, you'd see me. Really see me." His words were a punch to the chest. I had seen him, but I'd been too afraid to admit what that meant. We sat on a bench, the city lights reflecting on the water, and he told me about his life before me. Growing up in the Bronx, hiding his sexuality from his conservative family, finding solace in code. It was my escape, he said, until I met you, and it became my cage. I winced, but he didn't stop. You made me feel small, Julian, like I was nothing. I wanted to reach for him, to hold him, but I didn't deserve that yet. Instead, I apologized again, not with grand promises, but with the truth. I was scared, I admitted, of you, of what I felt. I pushed you away because I didn't know how to let you in. He didn't respond, but he didn't leave either. We sat there, the gap between us narrowing with every word. The next day, I invited him to coffee, not as a date, but as a chance to talk. To my surprise, he agreed. We met at a small cafe in the West Village, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and too expensive lattes. He was cautious, but he smiled once, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. We talked about everything but us movies, code, the kids at the youth center. It was a start. Over the next few weeks, we met more often, always on his terms. I let him set the pace, knowing I had to earn his trust. Sometimes, he'd share pieces of himself, a story about his first crush, a joke that made me laugh until my sides hurt. Other times, he'd go quiet, and I'd see the hurt I'd caused still lingering in his eyes. One evening, at a fundraiser for the youth center, I saw him in his element, surrounded by kids who looked at him like he was their hero. I donated again, this time publicly, and when our eyes met across the room, he gave me a nod, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. I clung to it like a lifeline. But the past wasn't done with us. One morning, a gossip blog posted an article about Carter Innovations, hinting at my unprofessional behavior with a former employee. They didn't name Eli, but the implications were clear. My stomach dropped as I realized someone from the team had leaked it, probably out of spite. I called Eli immediately, my voice shaking. I didn't know, I said. I'll fix this. He was silent for a long time before he spoke. You can't fix everything, Julian. Some things stay broken. He hung up, and I felt the ground shift beneath me. I'd been so focused on winning him back that I hadn't considered the world we lived in, a world that could twist our story into something ugly. I spent the day tracking down the source of the leak, confronting a junior developer who admitted to selling the story for quick cash. I fired him, not out of anger, but because trust was the one thing I couldn't afford to lose again. Then I called a press conference, not to defend myself, but to set the record straight. Eli Martinez was the best thing about this company, I said to the cameras. And I failed him. That's on me. The fallout was brutal. Investors pulled back. Stocks dipped. But I didn't care. For the first time, I was doing something for someone else. That night, Eli texted me, "Thank you. But this doesn't change us." I stared at the words, my heart sinking but not breaking. I wasn't giving up. The city felt colder after Eli's text, like the warmth had drained from the streets. I kept moving forward, though, because stopping meant losing him for good. I focused on rebuilding, not just the company, but myself. Therapy became my anchor. Dr. Lee pushed me to dig deeper, to face the parts of myself I'd buried, me fear of rejection, my need to dominate every room. You're not just apologizing to Eli, she said. You're apologizing to yourself for hiding who you are. It hit hard. I'd spent years pretending I didn't feel what I felt, that my attraction to men was a weakness I could ignore. Eli had shattered that illusion, and I was grateful, even if it hurt. I started attending events at the youth center, not to see Eli, but to understand the community he loved. I met kids who'd been kicked out of their homes, others who'd found courage in being themselves. Their stories humbled me, made me see how small my world had been. I volunteered, teaching a few coding classes, stumbling through at first but finding my footing. The kids didn't care about my title or my bank account. They cared that I showed up. Eli and I still met occasionally, always in public, always careful. He was warming to me, but trust was a slow burn. One night, over drinks at a quiet bar in Chelsea, he asked, "Why are you doing this?" "Julian, the therapy. The volunteering, is it for me or for you?" I didn't have an easy answer. "Both," I said finally. "I want to be someone you can trust, but I also want to be someone I can stand to look at." He didn't respond, but he stayed, and we talked until the bar closed. It was the first time I felt like we were equals, not boss and assistant, not even friends, but two people trying to find their way. I walked him to the subway, and when he turned to say goodbye, his hand brushed mine. It was brief, accidental, but it set my skin on fire. The next challenge came from my board of directors. They wanted me to step down, citing the bad press and my distraction from the company. I fought back, not for my ego, but for the employees who'd stuck by me. I spent days in meetings, restructuring deals, proving I could lead without being a tyrant. It was exhausting, but it gave me purpose. I wasn't just fighting for my job. I was fighting to show Eli I could change. One evening, I invited him to my apartment, not the sterile penthouse I used to live in, but a smaller place I'd moved to in Brooklyn. Closer to him, closer to real life. He hesitated, but came. The space was modest, cluttered with books and half-finished code on my laptop. "This isn't you," he said, looking around. "It's me now," I replied. "Or at least, it's who I'm trying to be." We cooked dinner together. A simple pasta dish that ended up slightly overcooked but perfect in its imperfection. We laughed, something we hadn't done in months. And for a moment, it felt like we were starting over. But when I reached for his hand, he pulled back. "I'm not ready," he said, his voice soft but firm. "I want to believe you, Julian, but I need time." I nodded, swallowing the ache in my chest. "Take all the time you need," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." He left, and I stood in my quiet apartment, feeling the weight of his absence, but also a flicker of hope. He hadn't said no. He'd said not yet. The holidays approached, and with them, a chance to see Eli in a new light. He invited me to a Christmas party at the youth center, a low-key event with string lights and kids exchanging secret Santa gifts. I brought a stack of coding books, donated under my name this time, and watched as Eli handed them out, his smile brighter than the lights. He introduced me to the kids as Julian, a friend, and the word friend felt like a gift. But the night wasn't without its shadows. One of the kids, a 16-year-old named Marcus, pulled me aside. "You're the guy who hurt Eli, aren't you?" he asked, his eyes sharp. I froze, then nodded. "I was. I'm trying to be better." He studied me, then said, "Don't screw it up again. He deserves more than that." I promised I wouldn't, knowing it was a promise I had to keep. As the party wound down, Eli and I ended up outside, sharing a cigarette neither of us really smoked. The cold bit at our fingers, but the warmth between us was undeniable. "I'm proud of you," he said suddenly, his breath visible in the air. "Not for the company, but for this, for showing up." I wanted to kiss him then, to close the distance between us, but I didn't. I just smiled and said, "Thank you." That night, I lay awake, replaying his words. For the first time, I felt like I was on the right path, not just for Eli, but for myself. But the road was long, and I knew the hardest part was still ahead. Winter tightened its grip on New York, and with it came a new kind of clarity. I was changing, but change was messy, full of missteps and moments of doubt. Eli and I were in a fragile limbo. Not quite friends. Not yet anything more. But every moment with him felt like a step towards something real. I kept volunteering at the youth center, finding a rhythm in the chaos of teaching kids who reminded me of Eli, resilient, guarded, brilliant. One afternoon, a girl named Lila asked me why I was there. "You don't look like you belong," she said, her eyes narrowing. I laughed, surprising myself. "I'm figuring out where I belong," I told her. "Same as you." She nodded, and I felt a shift, like I was finally part of something bigger than myself. Eli noticed, too. We started spending more time together outside the center walks in Central Park. Late-night diner runs. Moments where the city faded and it was just us. He was still cautious, but his walls were coming down. One night, over greasy burgers and milkshakes, he told me about his family. His parents had cut him off when he came out at 18, and he'd been on his own ever since. "I thought I'd prove them wrong," he said, staring at his plate. "That's why I worked so hard for you. I wanted to be enough." "You were always enough," I said, my voice thick. I was the one who wasn't. He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw something soften in his eyes. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but it was close. Work was another battle. The board was still breathing down my neck. But I'd managed to stabilize the company with a new round of funding. I made changes, more transparency, better support for employees, a culture that didn't thrive on fear. I wasn't perfect, but I was trying, and the team noticed. Still, every success felt hollow without Eli by my side. One evening, he called me, his voice shaky. "Can you meet me? It's important." I was at his apartment in 20 minutes, my heart pounding. He let me in, his face pale. "My dad's sick," he said. "Cancer." He reached out. "Wants to see me." I sat with him as he talked, the words spilling out anger, fear, the weight of years without his family. I didn't have answers, but I listened. And when he leaned against me, I held him. It was the first time he'd let me close, and I didn't dare move. He decided to visit his father in the Bronx, and to my surprise, he asked me to come. "Not as my boss," he said, "as my friend." I nodded, my throat tight. The visit was tense. His father, frail but stubborn, barely acknowledged me. Eli was quiet, his hand brushing mine under the table for strength. When his father apologized, haltingly, for pushing him away, Eli cried. I drove him home. And in the car, he said, "I don't know how to feel, but I'm glad you were there." That moment changed us. We started spending more time together, not just as friends, but as something undefined. Electric. One night, at a rooftop bar overlooking the city, he kissed me. It was quick, tentative, but it set my world on fire. "I'm still scared," he whispered. "Me too," I admitted. "But I'm all in, Eli, if you'll have me." He didn't answer, but he didn't pull away either. The next hurdle came unexpectedly. A former colleague, bitter about my changes at the company, leaked private emails from my early days as Sea Cruel messages that painted me as the monster I used to be. The press pounced, and the youth center faced scrutiny for accepting my donations. Eli was caught in the crossfire, his name dragged into the headlines again. I wanted to shield him, to fix it all. But he stopped me. "This isn't your fight," he said. "It's ours." Together, we drafted a statement, not denying the past, but owning it. Julian Carter is human. It read. He's made mistakes, but he's trying to make amends. So am I. We released it through the youth center's channels. And to my surprise, the community rallied behind us. The kids, especially, didn't care about my past, they cared about who I was now. Eli and I grew closer, but the weight of the world still pressed on us. One night, as we lay on his couch, tangled in each other, he said, "I want to forgive you, Julian, but I need to know you won't hurt me again." I looked into his eyes, seeing the man I loved, and made a vow not just to him, but to myself. "I'll spend every day proving it," I said. By spring, we were something new, not defined by labels, but by trust. We weren't perfect, but we were real, and that was enough for now. Spring in New York was a promise of renewal, but for Eli and me, it was a delicate dance. We were building something fragile, rooted in late-night talks and stolen moments. But the past still lingered like a shadow. I was learning to love without control, to let Eli lead when he needed to, and it was both terrifying and freeing. We spent more time at the youth center, co-teaching a coding boot camp for the kids. Eli was a natural, his patience endless, while I fumbled through explaining loops and variables. The kids teased me, calling me Mr. CEO, but their laughter was kind, and it felt like family. One day, Lila, the girl who'd questioned me before, handed me a drawing-a stick figure version of Eli and me, holding hands, with the words, "You're okay now," scrawled beneath. I kept it on my fridge, a reminder of what I was fighting for. Eli's relationship with his father was slowly mending. They talked on the phone, awkward but earnest, and I saw the weight lifting from Eli's shoulders. I supported him quietly, driving him to the Bronx for visits, sitting in the car when he needed space. "You don't have to do this," he said once, his voice soft. "I want to," I replied. "I want to be part of your life. All of it." At work, I was reshaping Carter Innovations into something human. I promoted a diverse leadership team, implemented mental health support, and started a scholarship program for underrepresented coders. Inspired by Eli, the board was skeptical, but the results spoke. Employee morale soared, and our apps were gaining traction again. I didn't tell Eli about the scholarship program. I wanted it to be a surprise, a way to show him I was listening. Our relationship deepened, but it wasn't without friction. Eli was still guarded, and I was still learning to let go of my need to fix everything. One night, after a long day at the center, we argued. He accused me of pushing too hard, of trying to save him like a project. "I'm not your redemption arc, Julian," he snapped. I froze, the truth of his words cutting deep. "I know," I said. "I just want to be good enough for you." He softened, and we talked until dawn, untangling our fears. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Then came the gala fundraiser for the youth center, held in a glittering Manhattan ballroom. Eli convinced me to attend, not as a donor, but as his +1. I wore a simple suit, no tie, feeling out of place among the city's elite. Eli, in a tailored blazer, looked like he belonged everywhere. We danced, his hand warm in mine, and for the first time, I didn't care who saw us. The kids from the center were there, cheering us on, and Marcus, the boy who'd called me out, gave me a grudging nod. "You're not terrible," he said, and I laughed. But the night wasn't all light. A reporter cornered us, asking pointed questions about my past and our relationship. Eli handled it with grace, deflecting with humor, but I saw the tension in his jaw. Later, in a quiet corner, he admitted, "I'm scared this will always follow us." I took his hands, meeting his eyes. "Let it. I'm not hiding anymore, and I'm not letting you go." The next morning, the headlines were kinder than I expected, focusing on the youth center and our work there. Eli read them over coffee, a small smile playing on his lips. "You're getting better at this," he said. I grinned, daring to hope we were building something unbreakable. But life doesn't let you rest. Eli's father took a turn for the worse, and we spent days at the hospital, navigating family dynamics I could barely understand. His mother, still cold, blamed Eli for choosing his life. I wanted to defend him, but he squeezed my hand, silencing me. "This is my fight," he whispered. When his father passed, Eli broke down in my arms, and I held him through the grief, knowing words weren't enough. The funeral was small, tense, but Eli stood tall, delivering a eulogy that left everyone in tears. I watched him, proud and heartbroken, knowing he was stronger than I'd ever be. Afterward, he asked me to stay with him, not just for the night, but for good. "I don't want to do this alone anymore," he said. I moved in the next week, my Brooklyn apartment becoming ours. We were finding our rhythm, but the world wasn't done testing us. A rival company offered Eli a lead developer role, a dream job with a salary that dwarfed mine. He was torn, and I was terrified not of losing him to the job, but of him thinking I'd hold him back. "Take it," I told him, my voice steady despite the ache. "You deserve everything." He looked at me, eyes searching, and said, "I want you in everything." Eli's decision about the job hung over us like a storm cloud. He didn't give an answer right away, and I didn't push. Instead, we leaned into our life together, carving out moments of joy in the chaos. Mornings in our shared apartment were my favorite, lie humming off key while making coffee, me stealing kisses when he wasn't looking. It was domestic, messy, real. But the past has a way of creeping back. One evening, as we walked home from the youth center, a man approached us, Eli's older brother, Carlos, who hadn't spoken to him since he came out. The confrontation was ugly, words sharp with years of resentment. "You're throwing your life away," Carlos spat, glancing at me like I was the problem. Eli stood his ground, his voice steady. "This is my life. You don't get to choose it." I stayed silent, my hand on his back, letting him fight his battle. Afterward, Eli was quiet, the weight of his family's rejection heavy again. We sat on our couch, his head on my shoulder, and I told him about my own coming out of myself, in therapy, and to a few close friends. I was scared I'd lose everything, I admitted. "But I gained you." He looked up, his eyes soft, and kissed me, slow and deliberate. It wasn't a fix, but it was a promise. At the youth center, we were planning a summer coding camp, and Eli threw himself into it, his passion infectious. I watched him mentor kids like Marcus and Lila, helping them build apps that told their stories. One day, Marcus showed me his projected game about identity, raw and honest. "Eli taught me it's okay to be me," he said. I nodded, my throat tight, knowing Eli had taught me the same. The job offer loomed larger as the deadline approached. Eli finally sat me down, his hands fidgeting. "I'm taking it," he said, "but not because I want to leave you. I want to build something of my own, like you did." I swallowed my fear and nodded. "I'm proud of you," I said, meaning it. We celebrated that night with cheap wine and a dance party in our living room, laughing until we couldn't breathe. But the transition wasn't smooth. Eli's new role meant long hours, and I felt the distance growing, not emotionally but physically. I missed him, the way we used to stay up coding together, the way his presence grounded me. I threw myself into Carter Innovations, launching the scholarship program in his name, Eli Martinez Scholars. When I told him, his eyes welled up. "You didn't have to," he said. "I wanted to," I replied. "You're my inspiration." The media storm had faded, but whispers of my past still circulated. A competitor tried to poach our top talent, citing my instability. I fought back, not with anger, but with results, proving Carter Innovations was stronger than ever. Eli was my sounding board, even from afar, texting me ideas late at night. "You've got this." He'd write, and I believed him. One weekend, we escaped to the Catskills, a rare break from our hectic lives. The cabin was small, the air crisp, and for 2 days, it was just us, no phones, no work, just Eli and me. We hiked, cooked terrible campfire meals, and made love under the stars. "I love you," I said, the words spilling out naturally for the first time. He froze, then smiled, his eyes bright. "I love you too," he whispered, and I felt like I could breathe again. Back in the city, reality hit hard. The youth center faced a funding cut, threatening the coding camp. Eli and I rallied, organizing a crowdfunding campaign that went viral, thanks to the kids' passion and Eli's relentless drive. At the launch event, Eli spoke to a packed room, his voice steady and powerful. "This isn't just about code," he said. "It's about giving kids a chance to be seen." I stood in the back, my heart swelling, knowing I'd follow him anywhere. But love doesn't erase challenges. Eli's long hours strained us, and I caught myself slipping into old habits, expecting too much, pushing too hard. One night, I snapped at him for missing dinner, and he looked at me, hurt flashing in his eyes. "I'm not your assistant anymore, Julian," he said quietly. I apologized, hating myself for the slip, and we talked it out. But it was a reminder of how fragile trust could be. As summer approached, we found a new rhythm. Eli's job was demanding, but he made time for us, for the center, for himself. I was learning to let go, to love without controlling. We were messy, imperfect, but we were us, and that was enough. Summer in New York was relentless, humid, chaotic, alive. Eli and I were finding our footing, but the world kept testing us. The youth center's coding camp was a success, with kids like Marcus and Lila presenting their projects to a packed community center. Eli beamed, his pride infectious, and I realized how much he'd shaped me into someone who could celebrate others' victories. But our personal life wasn't as smooth. Eli's new job pulled him in 100 directions, and I was juggling a company on the brink of a major acquisition. We stole moments when we cootled late-night takeout, walks along the Hudson, but the distance was starting to show. One night, I found him staring at his laptop, stress etched into his face. "I'm drowning," he admitted. I pulled him close, promising we'd figure it out together. The acquisition was a beast. A tech giant wanted Carter Innovations, and the negotiations were brutal. I wanted to protect my team, my vision, but the pressure was immense. Eli, despite his own workload, became my rock, reading contracts, offering insights. "You don't have to sell," he said one night. "You built this. It's yours." His belief in me was a lifeline, but it also made me question whether I was holding on for the right reasons. Then came a curveball. Eli's brother Carlos reached out, wanting to meet. Eli was hesitant, still raw from their last encounter, but he agreed, and I went with him. The meeting was tense, held at a neutral coffee shop in Midtown. Carlos apologized, haltingly, for his words at the pier. "I was wrong," he said. "I just want my brother back." Eli didn't forgive him outright, but he listened, and I saw a crack in the wall between them. Driving home, Eli was quiet, but he held my hand, and I knew he was processing. The youth center became our refuge. We spent weekends there, mentoring, laughing, feeling like we were making a difference. One day, Marcus pulled me aside. "You and Ellie are good together," he said. "Don't mess it up." I grinned, promising I wouldn't. But his word stuck with me. I couldn't afford to slip again. The acquisition talks hit a breaking point. The buyers wanted me to step down as CEO, and I was torn. It was a chance to secure the company's future, but it meant giving up control. I turned to Eli, laying out my fears over whiskey in our apartment. "What do you want, Julian?" he asked. "Not the company. Not me, yo." I didn't have an answer, but his question forced me to think. I wasn't the man who needed to rule anymore. I was the man who wanted to build, to love, to live. I rejected the acquisition, choosing to keep Carter Innovations independent. It was a risk, but it felt right. The team rallied, and we doubled down on innovation, launching a new app that put us back on the map. Eli was there for the launch, his smile brighter than the Times Square lights. "You did it," he said, and I shook my head. We did. But love isn't a straight line. Eli's job was wearing him down, and I saw the toll it took: late nights, missed meals, a flicker of the exhaustion I'd once caused. I tried to support him, cooking dinner, dragging him to bed when he worked too late. But I felt helpless. One night, he broke down, admitting he was scared of failing. "You won't," I said, holding him. "You're the strongest person I know." He looked at me, vulnerable, and said, "I need you to keep saying that." We started planning a future not just as a couple, but as partners. I proposed a project, a nonprofit arm of Carter Innovations, focused on tech education for underserved communities. With Eli at the helm, he was hesitant, worried about leaving his job, but I saw the spark in his eyes. "Think about it," I said. "We could change lives together." He didn't answer, but he kissed me, and I knew he was considering it. The summer ended with a community event at the youth center, a celebration of the kids' projects. Eli and I stood side by side, watching Lila present her app, a tool for queer teens to connect safely. The crowd cheered, and Eli squeezed my hand. "This is what matters," he said. I nodded, knowing he was right. As we walked home, the city buzzing around us, I felt a peace I hadn't known before. We weren't perfect, but we were trying, and that was enough. Eli stopped under a streetlight, turning to me. "I'm ready," he said. "For us. For everything." My heart leapt, and I pulled him close. The world falling away. Fall painted New York in shades of gold, and with it came a new chapter for Eli and me. His words under that streetlight re-echoed in my mind, a promise we were both determined to keep. We were building something, not just a relationship, but a life, and it felt like the city was cheering us on. Eli took the leap, leaving his job to lead the nonprofit arm of Carter Innovations. We named it Code for All, a nod to the kids at the youth center who'd inspired us. The launch was chaotic: late nights, endless meetings, arguments over budgets, but it was ours. Eli thrived, his vision turning abstract ideas into reality. I watched him pitch to donors, his passion lighting up rooms, and I fell in love with him all over again. Our personal life was a work in progress. Living together meant navigating Eli's habit of leaving dishes in the sink, my tendency to overanalyze everything. We fought, sometimes fiercely, but we always came back to each other. One night, after a stupid argument about laundry, he laughed and said, "We're really doing this, aren't we?" I pulled him close, nodding. "Yeah, we are." The youth center remained our anchor. Marcus and Lila became like family, their growth a testament to Eli's impact. Marcus got accepted into a coding boot camp, and Lila's app won a local award. At the award ceremony, Eli gave a speech, crediting the kids, and, to my surprise, me. "Julian taught me that change is possible," he said, his eyes meeting mine. He's proof you can rewrite your story. I blinked back tears, overwhelmed by the man he'd helped me become. But the past wasn't done with us. A former board member, bitter about my rejection of the acquisition, leaked internal documents, painting me as reckless. The press pounced, in code for all face scrutiny. Eli and I worked tirelessly to protect it, holding community forums, proving our commitment. The kids rallied, sharing their stories online, and the backlash turned into support. We're stronger than this, Eli said, and I believed him. One evening, as we sat on our balcony overlooking Brooklyn, Eli turned to me. I want to get married, he said, his voice steady. I froze, my heart racing. Not now, not yet, but someday. I want forever with you. I took his hand, my voice thick. I want that too. We didn't need a ring or a date, just the promise. Raw and real. The year ended with a celebration at the youth center, a fundraiser that doubled as a holiday party. The kids decorated, stringing lights and blasting music, and Eli and I danced, surrounded by the community we'd built. Marcus pulled us into a group hug, whispering, "You guys are gross, but I'm glad you're happy." We laughed, and I felt whole. Looking back, I saw the arc of our story, not a fairy tale, but a journey of mistakes, growth, and love. I'd once made Eli bow to me, a cruel act born of fear. Now, I was the one kneeling, not for forgiveness, but in gratitude, for the man who'd changed me, for the life we were building, for the future we'd face together. As the city sparkled below, Eli leaned against me, his warmth grounding me. "We did good," he said. I nodded, kissing his temple. "Yeah, we did." And in that moment, I knew whatever came next, we'd face it side by side. Two imperfect men who'd found something worth fighting for.